Previously on CSIS 2470.
Every time I click move, he only goes north. Well, we want him to go north when he's pointing north, but if he were pointing to the right, east, or to west or south, we want him to go that way when we click the move button, right? So this is where we're going to start building the turning position stuff here. So let's go back and take a look at our HTML. And right now, we could put an on-click on all of these, and we could put an on-click on all of these, but we're going to do event listeners. We're going to add event listeners to the buttons, right? And that can be done directly in the JavaScript. So let's get rid of this. In the JavaScript directly, we're going to target that button, right? That button was called, well, we don't have a name for it yet. In fact, we don't need one. We'll just use our query selector, right? So let's go let move equal document dot query selector. And we are looking for a section. And we want the button, which section was that? It's the action buttons there. So we want the action buttons. And remember, all that I'm doing here on line 4, this is just a regular old CSS selector, right? And I want a button, but I don't want the first button. I actually want the second button. So nth child 2, right? I want that button right there. Now, just for making sure we understand what's going on here, I'm going to console that out. Move button, right? So when we load the page, go to the console, refresh the page, you can see that that button right there is the move button. It's this button right here, okay? And so we have that button right here. Well, now what I can do to that move button, say move button dot add event listener. Now this is really the first new thing we've done today, right? Everything else is stuff we've looked at in previous lectures. So this is the first brand new thing, which is adding an event listener. Now the event listener takes in a couple of parameters that are required, and there's at least one other one that's not required, but the two that are required, the first one is what is the event I'm listening for? All this button is doing is sitting there and it's listening for events. Well, remember, when somebody clicks on it, an event will be fired. So we're listening for a click event, right? So click. And then the other thing is the function that we want to call when the event occurs. And the function we're calling is move. Now notice the parentheses are not there. I'm not saying we're calling move parenthesis. The reason being is because the name of the function is just move. It's not move parenthesis, right? If I need to call the function, then I have to put the parentheses there. But if I'm just saying what's the name of the function, which is what we're doing on line 5, what's the name of the function? It's the move function, right? Okay, well now move button, which is that button that says move, has an event listener attached to it, and when we click it, it will fire off the move function. Remember, I've removed it from here. It's no longer here. Right? We just attached it directly in the JavaScript. Now when I refresh, I click move and it still works just like before. Okay, let's start cleaning up this code a little bit here, right? First of all, let's get rid of the build world. I've already built it. And let's take a look at what's going on here. A lot of this stuff that's happening, in fact, almost all of this right here, this is what happens when we first load up the game. Well, eventually we're going to have this reset button functioning so that when I click it, it resets everything. So we might as well put it into a function now that will do that for us, and then call that function when the page loads, right? So let's start with some basics here. First of all, let's make this function called build world, okay? So the build world function is basically just these two things right here. We might add more to it later. And in fact, we don't even need the curly braces, although we are going to need them later, so I'm going to leave them there so that doesn't come back and bite us. So I will leave the curly braces there. So there's build the world, and that's just the divs and everything. And that's all that build world is. We'll leave this divs variable here. Actually, we can put that inside of here. Let's put it there because we don't need that outside of that function. And then these are things that we always are going to build globally, right? These are things we're going to access in all of our different functions. So we'll leave those there. Now let robot top. This is looking like an initialization, right? So let's maybe have a function called initialize robot. And what we will do in there, let's copy that. We'll just declare the variable outside of the function globally, and then in here we will assign it, right? And then after we assign it, when we first initialize, we will also apply that value to the robot here. So now these are our global things, and we're going to clean that up in a second. And then here's our build world, and here's our initialize robot, and then here's our move function, right? It's pretty simple stuff. Now what I want is something for initializing the game, right? Function initialize game. And what are we going to do in there? Easy. We're going to build the world, there we go. And then we're going to initialize the robot. I'm going to copy that so I don't have to spell that again, right? So this function right here is going to build our world, which is this function down here, and then it's going to initialize the robot right here. And so what I want to do here is call that once the page loads. And there is an HTML attribute called onLoad. We could just stick it right here in the body. Once the body loads, do that. Easy. So now when the page loads, or the body loads, then we run the initialize game function. The initialize game function builds the world, initializes the robot. Okay, let's take a peek here. Refresh. Everything seems the same. I click on move, it still seems to be working. But now we have a much better structure, and we're going to keep this solid, better structure throughout the rest of the time here. Now, next up, we need to get to the point where I can turn this robot here. I can click turn east, and he'll point to the right. And then when I click move, he'll move that way, right? So let's just start figuring out how we're going to rotate him. Well, we need event listeners on him. Well, we can do this again, right, for each button, right? But that would be kind of a pain. Remember, we have this other guy called query selector all. So how about we do this? Rather than having this move button here, we just get all of the buttons. And rather than doing query selector, we do query selector all, and we just select button. Now remember, button is an HTML tag, and because it's a tag, therefore it is also a selector, right? You can select a tag in your CSS. So now I have buttons here, and it's just all of the buttons. And just to prove that, let's get rid of that for a moment because that doesn't exist anymore. Console.log btns, right? And when I refresh, I now have all the buttons here, okay? So now I can just loop through this array and add an event listener to it, no problem. So let's do that when we initialize the game. Maybe we'll make a function called attach events or something like that, and we'll do that in a function. That function will just loop through this array right here and attach the event listener to all of the buttons. Now, let's just do a for of loop, right? For btn of btns, we're listening for a click event for all the buttons. That they're all going to be click events. However, this is where it can get a little tricky. Well, if I click the move button, I want to call the move function. If I click the turn north, I want to call the turn north function, and so on and so forth. However, we can make one function that we will build and customize to handle all of it. So we're going to call that function operate. Let's go with operate robot. But let's just start simple, okay? This is the add listener. This is done. I mean, really not much more to it than that, right? Oh, except for a semicolon there. So let's make this function here called function robot. Now, one thing that's fun about events is when an event fires, and when there's an event listener listening for it, when this event fires, this click event fires, and it calls this function, it will send as an argument to that function the actual event. So we can actually grab it here with a variable, just whatever you want to call it. E or EVT is pretty common. I just like to use E because it's simple. So let's just console that out for a minute, okay? Console.log E. So here's what's going to happen. First thing happens, the game is initialized, it builds the world. That's easy. It initializes the robot, sets them in the right position. Then we add the event listeners to all of the buttons, which is happening right here. Now, whenever I click a button, we are capturing the event, and we can look at what's going to happen in the console here. So refresh the page. When I click reset, that was a pointer event. And there are details we can look at, which we will do in a minute. When I click on move, that's a pointer event, right? All these are going to be pointer events. There's turn north. So let's expand the turn north one here. And there's a few things here. You might recognize this format because we're looking in the DOM and all of the properties. If we scroll down here though, one of the things is called source event, or excuse me, source element right there. That source element says button. Well, it's a very specific button. It's the turn north button. And if I drop down here, you can see all of its properties. And these are the same properties that you would see if you were to come over here, right? Let's just go into the console this way and click on the north button and now look down here, and I'm looking in the DOM. And what do we see in here normally? We look in the attributes. That's a big common one we tend to look at. But we could see all the different properties here. We could see the inner HTML and the inner text down here. If I did it past it, I think I did. Yeah, there we go right there. Inner text is turn north, right? So when we're over here, I'm able to see all of those same things here. So let's just simplify this a little bit. Let's go back here. Rather than clicking consoling out the whole event, I just want to console out the source element, which we saw. Let me just look at it real quick one more time so you can see what we're talking about here. So I expanded the pointer, the click event. Right, let's click on turn west, expand it. Down here, there is source element. That is the actual button, okay? So I'm going to console out that button. And you'll see when we click now, we get a different experience. When I click reset, it's canceling out the reset button, or the move button, or the eat button, or the north, or south, or as east, I guess, south. Well, the next thing we can do is, okay, I have the button. We can do some tricky things like, okay, if it's the reset button, do this. If it's the move button, do that. If it's the eat button, do that, right? But how do we do that? How do we tell our code which one it is? Well, you might recall we've looked at custom properties in the past. And so we can get into the attributes, right? If I go in here and look at one of the buttons where we could see all of the pieces of it, we get into the attributes array right here. And right now, this button that we're looking at, which I think it's the north button, there's just a title. That's all there is, right? And if we go in our HTML, we can see that that is the case. And where is the button? And that was the north one, and that's all that's there is the title. What I'm going to do is add some custom properties in here that are going to be what command this button is responsible for, right? So, for example, we can do data dash. So you always start with data dash, and we'll just call it command, and it's going to be turn dash north, or turn dash east, or turn dash south, or west. I know I typoed there, south. Let's just start with that. Then up here, we'll do the same thing. We'll give it data dash command equals reset, or move, or eat. So now when I click on the button over here, JavaScript, right now I'm canceling out the source element. Well, I can cancel out now the attributes array, and I want the data dash command element, and I want its node value, right? And we'll go look at that in the DOM in just a second. But when I refresh now, this is what we get. Go to the console, click this, and it's reset, it's move, it's eat, turn north, turn east, turn south, right? So what am I looking at here? Well, if I right click here, go down to inspect on the reset button, there's the button there. And if I go and look at the attributes here, I went down to the data command here, and the value, if I scroll down to the data command, node value is, oh, I have rest there, it's a typo. Sorry, I'll fix that. That should be reset right there. Sorry about that. But that'll clean up when we refresh in a second here. But I'm getting that node value, right? If I right click on that and I go down to copy the property path here, just paste it over here and you'll see what that looks like. I'll just paste it down here. It's attributes data command.node value, which is exactly what I typed right here. Okay. So if you ever forget how to get the node path, you can do what I just did there. But now we have that. Okay, well, now that we have this is easy. Let's just do a switch statement on that, right? So let's call that let command equal that. And then we just do a switch statement on command. And we'll have all the different cases, right? We have case north, which is going to, not north, when we're talking about, case reset. And we'll just put a break in there so I don't forget. And then that's going to be move, that's going to be eat, that's going to be turn north, south, west, east. So we just go case move, case eat, and these we can do kind of all at once. Turn north, or east, or south, or west. Okay, so now we have this really simple case statement here. And for the moment, what I can do is just simply console out what happened, or I can call a function, or I can do whatever. Let's start by calling the move function for move, because that's already something we've built, right? And so is it just called move or move robot? I forgot. Move. Okay, so we'll just call the move function right there. So now let's check this out. When I refresh, if I click this, nothing will happen. I think I've even cleared everything out of the console. These buttons don't do anything yet, but move should still be moving, right? So let's quickly just make the eat function temporarily, and we'll just call eat, and we'll just do a silly function for now. Function eat, and it'll just say you ate the donut, right? So if I refresh it now, when I click move, it moves. When I click eat, it says you ate the donut, right? So now all I have to do here is build functions to handle the turning or the resetting. That's the last one we're going to do because it's a little bit weirder. But for turning, all we're going to do is just rotate it. We're just going to use CSS to rotate the position, right? So let's just make a function here called turn robot. And let's give it one parameter to tell it which direction that it's going to be pointing in when we're done. And then we'll also pass in the actual specific degrees of the angle. And so the reason we need the direction is because in our move function, eventually what we're going to do here is something like if north, then move north, right? Move up. Or if it's south, then it's going to, move down and so forth. So we want to have the robot be aware of which direction it's facing so that every time it turns, we can change that variable so that the move function knows which direction it is, right? So let's just make a variable called, we're going to need robot left because we're going to be messing with that to move it to the left and right. And then we'll make one called robot direction. Okay. So now what we're going to do here is if the robot is being told to turn north, then its final direction when it's over will be north. So let's go ahead and put in here north, comma 0 degrees, and we'll fix those degrees in a minute. And this will be east, this will be south, and this will be west. All right. So again, just for clarity, let's slow down and take a deep breath here for a minute. The first parameter there on the turn robot function that we haven't built yet is what direction are we going to store in that robot dir variable on line 6. So that way, if we ever need to know which direction we're facing, we can look there. So that's the first thing. So if I told the robot to turn south, well, then I need to store that it's now facing south, right? And so if I told it to turn north, I have to store that it's facing north. Well, north is 0 degrees. That's easy. South is 180 degrees. Go study your geometry, folks. All right. And then east is 90 degrees. And west is -90 or it's 270. Either way you want to look at it, they're both the same. Okay. And that's all we need. So we just need to build this turn robot function, right? Well, this is pretty simple here. Let's clean that space up. Here we go. Function turn robot. And the first thing it takes in is a direction. And the next thing it takes in is a degree, right? Well, we're just going to use CSS properties again. And so in CSS, you can use the transform property and set the scale or the rotation or all kinds of different things. And so it's just going to be robot.style.transform, and it's going to be equal to rotate x degrees, right? What's the degrees? Well, we'll fix that in a second. The degrees is that right there. So instead of x, we're going to concatenate that on right there. So right quote plus plus quote, and we're putting the variable called degrees there. I know it looks a little weird, but that's going to be, 0 degrees or 90 degrees or 180 degrees or whatever. Because the normal syntax, real quick, is this. Transform, rotate, 90 degrees. So if we start the robot like that, let's just go ahead and save this real quick. We refresh. Now he's pointing to the right because I said right here in our CSS to do that. Okay. But we're doing all of it in our JavaScript instead. Okay. So we've rotated. And then the other thing we have to do is just tell the robot position that you are now set to whatever direction we passed in. That's everything, right? So let's take a look at this. Refresh. And now if I click turn east, he turns to the right. If I say south, he goes down. West to the left. North goes up. Now we still have this problem. When I move, he still goes this way, right? We haven't finished our move function. But he now rotates the way we want him to. No problem. Okay, now that he can move, let's now go and have our move function work properly, right? So let's go back. And the move function is pretty simple. I mean, we're almost done here. Look at how simple this operate robot function is. It's just about 10 lines of code, right? Let's look at our move function. And we're just going to do another switch statement here. So why don't we pass in the direction that the robot is facing at the moment, which will always be that variable. So we just say robot dir. That way the move function is independent. It doesn't have to worry about global variables. It can take in a parameter, right? This will just take in the dir, right, the direction. And we'll just do a switch statement. Super simple here. So we'll do switch on dir. And there's only going to be 4 possibilities, right? N, E, W, or S. And so we're just going to have those 4 cases, right? So case north, and we'll do a break so we don't forget. And then we have case east, and we have, we don't want to do northeast, right? That's tricky business. Northeast, southwest. Well, we already know what to do when he goes north, right? We decrement robot top by 100. That's what we do when he's going north. Well, we also would know then if he's going south, we would increment him by 100, right? So that's pretty straightforward. So what'll happen with just the north and the south right now, it'll either have an N or an E or W or an S. If it has an N or an S, for example, it will increment or decrement the top, and then it's done with the switch statement. And then what it'll do down here is update the robot and move it to that position by setting its top property to whatever robot top is, right? We're going to do the same thing with east and west, but before we do, let's just look at our world here, refresh it. Remember, the robot was born down here. So right here is like an invisible line. That's 0. That's the robot's left. And he's, by nature, 0 positions away from left. He's right up against it. If I were to add 100 to its left, it'll push him over 100 away from the left, which moves it to the right. So it seems a little counterintuitive when you first learn about this. But if I want to move 100 away from the left of where I'm supposed to be, well, that's going to move me to the right, unless I move negatively, right? So if we're going east, we're going to move robot left, which we did declare back on line 6 right here, robot left. So robot left, and we're going to plus equals 100. And then if we want to go to the west, well, we're going to subtract 100, right? So for example, if we moved east 3 times, we would go from 0 to 100 to 200 to 300. Then if I wanted to go west, we would subtract and go back to 200 to 100 to 0. We'll worry about him breaking out of his world in a minute. Okay, so here we go. We got robot left minus equals 100. And now all we have to do is also target the left property of the robot and set it equal to whatever the left is. That's it. That's the entire move function right there. Now keep in mind, whenever this function runs, only one of these things is going to change. Either the top or the left is going to change. When we're done with the switch statement, we don't know or care which one changed. We just update both of these to make sure that we don't miss anything. So if his left is at 0 and we move him directly north, left will stay at 0 when this function runs, but top will change to negative 100 or 200 or whatever. And so we will update top to that new value. We'll also update left to the value that it stayed at. It didn't change, so that's fine. But now take a look. Refresh. If I move, he goes up and nothing happens. So let's take a look at our code here. And I think I saw, yeah, I did. I set robot position equal to dir. That should be robot direction. So on the turn robot here, when we were setting it to N, ES, or W, I was taking that parameter here and trying to assign this variable called robot POS to equal this value, and robot POS doesn't exist. So that should be robot dir. And so down here in the move function, when I was trying to pass in robot dir right here to the move function, well, it didn't have a value. And so it couldn't move because it switched to nothing, right? Because this value of robot dir didn't exist. Hopefully that makes sense. If not, you might have to rewind the video and re-listen to me explain that. Sorry about that. The other thing that we didn't do that's still going to cause a problem, so check this out when I refresh. I still don't think he's going to move, and he's not moving because right now we haven't set his default position to north, right? We've just declared this variable here, but not given it north. So when we initialize the robot, we need to do that here and set robot dir equals north. So that's his default position, the way he's facing. And we're going to need to set robot left equal to 0. That's where it starts out. Okay, I think we're in a position now he should start moving and in the correct directions. So we click move, and he does go north. I turn east, and he now moves east. South, he moves south, west, and north again, and beautiful. Okay, now you'll remember that he still has this problem, right? And keep going forever. Well, we got to block him in his world. So let's take care of that. And I want you to stop and think for a minute, how would you solve that problem, right? It's a pretty simple thing, but let's think about it for a minute, and then I'm going to draw a little diagram. But pause the video and think.